My husband wasn't providing for years, and I stuck around. That's what inspired me to start my brand. Only skill I had in front of me was doing hair. People get in this sticky space and they're like, oh, I need to find a whole other career. Sometimes it's literally the trade. And I was like, you want to fly in to get your hair done by me? But I was like, keep it cool, you know. 75% of my clientele was driving or flying in. I'm like, this is nuts. When I started to make money, I was like, I don't need you. Like, I can leave you. We were like, we're getting divorced. No, we're not. We're getting divorced. No, we're not. We're getting divorced. Don't let yourself drift too far, because then it's harder to bring it back in. And do things that will help maintain a healthy marriage, like date nights, like therapy if you need it. We were really disconnected and in a dark place to like having fun again. All right, God, let's go. Yep. Where are we going? I'm here to listen.
Oh, that's so excited.
I'm at a new chapter and I'm excited.
Welcome back to Pain to Power. I am your host, Kayla Cardona. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you to hit that follow button, subscribe. Your likes and shares and comments and 5-star reviews are crucial. They help the show reach more people and make a bigger impact. I'm dedicated to bringing value and helping as many people as possible, and your support makes that happen. Additionally, I am seeking sponsors for the show. If you or someone you know that is interested in partnering with Pain to Power, let's connect. You can send me a message on Instagram at paintopowerpod or email me at paintopowerpod@gmail.com. Now, without further ado, let's introduce our new guest. She is a visionary entrepreneur and educator known for transforming the beauty industry with her innovative approach to business and mindset. As a founder and CEO of Natural Beaded Rose and DKW Styling Salon, she has empowered thousands to build successful careers through her unique strategies. Beyond her entrepreneurial ventures, she is a dedicated mentor, speaker, and podcast host, sharing her journey of building an 8-figure empire while balancing life as a wife and mother of 4. Please welcome to the show, Danielle White.
Woo! Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah. Wow, you are just you're young, and what you have overcame and the things that you've built and lost and built again. Wow. Like, I absolutely adore you. And I know there's thousands and thousands of people that just look up to you, and you've just done so much with such little time. And I adore you.
I'm like a 41-year-old, but I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, I feel like I have the experience of like a 50-year-old.
Yeah.
But it's fine. I started young.
We're like young. 70. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like you've lived like 50 lives. That's insane. And it holds, it touches home for me a little bit, because you're like a legend in the hair industry. And like, I was in the hair industry for like 10 years, and we spoke about it on your podcast, which, by the way, if you guys haven't already, go follow her podcast. We have an episode together, which it's crazy how it was released today.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was coming out today. My team's like, it's out.
Yeah, no. And of course I watched it, because whenever I am on podcasts, like I forget what we talk about.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, right? You just get in this flow. So I watched it. I'm like, dang, like
we were good.
We were really good. Yeah.
It
No, it was a great episode. So anyways, there's a lot to unpack here. Yeah. But first, like, start off with like where you're from, where you grew up, and I guess, kind of how you got into the beauty industry.
Yeah. So I am originally actually from Utah.
Yeah.
I was raised Mormon, in the Mormon culture, in that community, in that bubble. So I started life very young, because the culture there, that's like, if you're not engaged by the time you're 18, you're broken. So
I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah. Like, I remember my roommates in college, they were like, oh, like I got engaged at 18. They were like, oh, when's it our turn? Like, I mean, it might not be as much like that now, but for me, it wasn't abnormal to be engaged by 19, married by 20. So that's kind of where, that's where my journey started. And it's funny, because I didn't actually want to go do hair. I have a similar story to you, where I'm like, I think I'll go to college. I went to maybe one semester and I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not for me. And so then I'm like, well, like I got to find something. So I'm like, go trade school. You know, it's not, back then it was like a year time commitment. So I'm like, I can do that. So I went to trade school and I started doing hair and I actually started to really like it. Like I had a knack for it. I loved it. It was fun for me. I'm like, wow, this is so fun. But I never really, back then it wasn't like I didn't have big business goals or ambition or anything like that. To me, it was a hobby because hairstylists are very, they're looked down on as just, you know, just a hairstylist. Like you work 12 hours a day and if you can make $20 an hour, you did it, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just like one of those things I did as like a hobby and I just expected my husband to make it big. And that was just what I did for fun.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started. But then obviously things took a turn.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But
so it took a turn in the sense of you building an empire basically with your hair extension line, right?
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I mean, everything kind of took a turn because the reason I built my empire was it was back in 2007.
Okay.
When my husband owned a mortgage company and he was very successful. We actually moved to Vegas and then, long story, but he moved back to Utah. And things were doing really, really well. And we were young. Like I didn't have any kids. I was like in my 20s. I had my Range Rover. I had this like 7,000 square foot home in Utah.
Oh.
Like I was like, we did it like at a very young age.
Wow.
And we didn't have kids at the time. And we were just kind of living the life. And then I decided, you know, to have my first kid.
And that was before the crash, obviously.
Yeah. So this is before the crash.
Oh, you guys were living.
Yeah, we were living
wow.
it. Yeah. He
and
had like
mortgage.
Yeah, we were in the hot spot of mortgages. And my husband's like a phenomenal trainer and speaker. So he just naturally had success when the market was hot.
Yeah.
But he didn't have a lot of reps under his belt as being a business owner or entrepreneur.
Ah.
So we have a baby and this is when like things are starting to financially get rocky because that's when it started, like the market started changing and turning and we started actually like drifting apart, but I was so young. I didn't really know any different. I just was like, he's got to work and hustle and grind and do the things. So I just kind of took care of my baby and like didn't really think about it. And then when I could slowly see like finances, like credit cards building up and like where I'm like, babe, I need money to pay the bills, you know? And he's like, oh, we don't have any, put it on the Amex.
Oof.
And things are just like climbing to the point where we were like $300,000-$400,000 in debt.
And this was obviously before your extension line took off?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
So this is all, this is the pre-story to why I even started my business.
Okay.
So at the time I was a hobby hairstylist.
Okay.
Which is fun.
Yeah.
I started doing extensions right out of the gate because I have such crappy hair naturally. So I wanted to find a solution to my hair. So, but I still didn't like charge a lot. I was like, oh, $30 a row. That's fine. Like, what? Yeah, like I was like,
sign me up.
I literally was like, I loved what I did so much in the transformation and I didn't believe in myself enough to charge any different. So I was like, yeah. And I didn't do my numbers. So I was like, just a little hobby money, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we kind of started like losing things that I was like, ooh, this is getting a little bit dicey.
Oof.
And I thought another baby would fix the problem.
What made you think another baby would fix the problem?
So when I had my first baby, I was so happy. I had the Range Rover, the cars, financially, like we were there. And I'm like, I'm so happy I have this cute little baby.
Okay.
And I loved my baby. And I thought, oh, like, I don't know, another baby made me happy. So let's do that.
You didn't think financially.
No, I just was like, I'm like, we'll be fine. I didn't know the market was crashing. I was like, we'll be fine. It's going to turn around and we'll be fine.
Okay.
So I get pregnant and I can see the ship sinking, but I'm like, it's going to turn around. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Oof. And I was 9 months pregnant with my second daughter and my husband came to me and he was like, hey, I need to tell you something. Like I've had an affair.
Okay.
So I'm like at a pretty dark space then. And he drops that on me.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, tell me more. So it was one of his clients because he's in the coaching business and they were kind of dating and then ended up kind of like making out. Nothing more happened than that. But like in the culture that we were raised in, like, I'm like, that hurt. The fact that he was emotionally connected to another woman while I'm 9 months pregnant. So,
And then everything else you got going
and
on.
everything, I know we're
Yeah.
losing everything.
Yeah.
I'm just in such like a scary, vulnerable spot.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm a hobby hairstylist. My husband just cheated on me, and
Yeah.
we are in debt. We're not only like, we're like in debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And you were also relying on him,
Right.
like for everything.
Yeah.
So he was your everything.
Yeah.
Oof. Okay.
So that's kind of where it got pretty dark for me. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. And I just got to this place where not only did I lose his trust, but even he wasn't the provider anymore. So that safety and security got ripped out.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, well, I have no safety and security. The only reason I stayed with him was because number one, I didn't believe in myself. And number two, because I just had a second baby with him.
Wow.
Like if we didn't have kids, I probably wouldn't be married. I'd be like, see you later. Like I'll go provide for my own and do my own thing.
Wow.
But I was, like I said, I didn't believe in myself as hair to do something to make great money.
Yeah.
So that's what inspired me to start my brand.
Oh.
Is because my husband wasn't providing for years and I stuck around.
Wow.
And he was encouraging. Like we decided we were going to work on our marriage. Like we realized we were in like a really dark space.
Yeah.
And so we started doing date nights every week when we were like really in a dark place.
Yeah.
And we had no money. That's actually what birthed the podcast I have one called Date Your Wife. Because we were like, okay, if we're going to try to make this work, we need to start dating again. Because that's what happened is we drifted apart and all the money did and the market crashing was expose the reality of where our relationship was at.
Wow.
And so, I'm sitting there like feeling so vulnerable and I'm like, well, I felt like I owed it to my kids to give it a shot, which is like any mom out there, you're like, don't say it for the kids, but you are always going to be there for your kids. You want what's best for your kids.
Yeah.
So I thought I'm not going to call it quits unless I've really genuinely worked on repairing my marriage and let's see if we can reconnect. Because when we were dating, there was a lot of chemistry. Like we were a really good fit. It's just we drifted apart because he was working all the time. And I just was raised in a culture where it's like the mom stays home and has the kids and the guy goes out and hunts and works and like you just be happy.
Yeah.
Like you hit the checklist and you just are happy.
Wow.
So when I hit the checklist and then, the rug got pulled from underneath me and everything was exposed, it was crazy too because at that time I started questioning the religion I was raised in. And so did my husband. So not only had we lost everything, all of our friends like turned on us. They're like, because it's a very tight community in Utah. Like it's very, like it's not even like the religion, it's the culture itself.
Got it.
So we just felt like all of our friends, nobody wanted to hang out. They actually started running their mouth online. Then it just got so dark. I'm like, oh, my lowest of lows, like not even my friends. And then it got worse. Like our families were like, you're leaving the religion. Like you're not going to go to heaven. Like you're not, like, it's like they're losing. If you leave the religion and the Mormon culture, like they believe like when you die, like you don't get to be with your family. Like that's how people don't understand how wild it is. So like when we said we were leaving, like our parents were just like, oh my gosh, like, because they're Mormon too.
Yeah.
And they're like, I can't believe this. Like, but we felt like we needed to leave the culture and community and start over. So that's kind of what we did. We were like, we had nothing. We lost everything. We literally sold everything in our house just to pay to move to Arizona. Like it had gotten so bad that I'm like, we need to get out of here. We weren't paying rent. We short sold our house.
Oh.
Like moved to a rental. Couldn't even pay rent in this rental.
Wow.
Literally, there was times where I tapped out every credit card and I was like, top ramen's fine. we can live on that, you know? And I mean, it was just a dark place, but I kept thinking like, we're going to come out of it. We're going to come out of it. And so that's what took us to Arizona is I was like, let's just sell everything. We literally sold all of our furniture in our house just to pack everything in a U-Haul and move to Arizona.
Wow.
So that was kind of our version of like a fresh start. And that's when we committed to, going on these dates every week to see if we could like rekindle and reconnect and see if we could come back together. And so this is when my husband Garrett was cheerleading me on. He's like, you need to start a brand. And I'm like, what is a brand? Like back 13 years ago, people didn't have personal brands.
Yeah.
People barely had, I don't even think Instagram wasn't even alive, So he's like, you need to start a brand. I'm like a logo? Like, what's a brand? Like, I just, like, I don't know what this is. I'm like, I'm a hairdresser. He's like, no, I think like, you maybe should teach people this extension thing you figured out. Because prior to that, I had done like every type of extension course you could imagine after school. And that's how I created my system.
Okay.
So I mixed a little bit of everything together and started, doing it on clients and teaching people for free. Cause they'd be like, this is cool. What are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. Do you want to come watch? So I was kind of
Wow.
already like teaching people, but again, I didn't value myself. It was just fun for me. I
Yeah.
enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed sharing. So I didn't really care. And it wasn't until we lost everything and he's telling me, create a brand and all this, you love teaching people, like, why don't you sell an online course or something? And I'm like, what? I'm a hairstylist. I have such low standards and limiting beliefs for myself. And more than anything, I was just like, I just want to be a mom. Like I love my babies to this day, but I'm like, I just want to be a mom. And it's funny because I'm like, I feel like I was called for much more than that. And I didn't know what that was at the time. And the only skill I had in front of me was doing hair. So I think a lot of times people get in this sticky space and they're like, oh, I need to find a whole other career or I need to go find something else. I'm like, sometimes it's literally the trade or the skill right in front of you.
Ooh, that's good.
And people don't even understand it.
Yeah.
So that was initially how I started my brand. Is I just hopped on YouTube. I started like saying, hi, I'm Danielle, the creator of Natural Beauty Rose. And I look back and I'm like, I look like I'm 15 in those videos. That's really fun. I had bleach blonde hair. Like it was so scary.
Bleach blonde.
It was so blonde. Like everybody's blonde in Utah. So so it was funny though. And I'm actually pretty introverted by nature. Now I'm a lot more comfortable because I do a lot of podcasting and videos and trainings and things like that. But the idea of like starting a brand when social media was like barely getting going and putting myself on camera, I wanted to throw up like every single day. And it was like, who's going to watch this? What are they going to think? Who am I to say I created a hair extension system? I'm like, nobody's going to believe me. I mean, all these thoughts are going in my head.
Right.
But I got to this space where I'm like, I don't really have a choice. Like, I can barely feed my children right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, and my husband's not showing any signs of producing anytime soon. So I just literally got on YouTube, started talking about my crappy hair. I'd get around, jump on and be like, I have homeless hair and these like crappy, like nobody was doing that either. Like everyone was so perfect. And I was very transparent.
Wow.
And just being real. And it was interesting. The minute I started doing that, I started having people like email me. I had like a blog set up and they'd email me and be like, hey, like, do you ever take like people that fly into you? And I was like, you want to fly in to get your hair done by me? Like, I'm like, what?
That's amazing.
So this was when, and at the time we had moved to a tiny town in Arizona that literally you had to drive past like 3 cattle farms to get to our house. And I worked in a salon spa studio right next to my house.
Okay.
And I like literally the tiniest, like the suites.
Yeah.
Like I had like a Costco painting I was really excited about. Like I was starting over. I was starting fresh. I didn't care. I was like, hey, I'm out of Utah. I'm out of the culture. Like this is my chance.
Yeah.
And it just shows like the power of perception with like being you.
Yeah.
And, you can build a brand or whatever you want, even in a small town. So I start getting people reach because I'm blogging on fashion. I'm blogging on like just stuff I like, whether it's food or whatever. I started my brand just like blogging and talking about what I liked. And that's when I had people start reaching out and they wanted to, drive or fly in and things like that. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I was like, can I do this? But I was like, keep it cool, and it started to become normal. That probably after living in Arizona for like 3 years, I would say like 75% of my clientele was driving or flying in. I'm like, this is nuts in this tiny little town.
Wow.
And so this actually was when I decided, I'm like, okay, I should create an online course. I had no money at the time. I was like, how am I going to create an online course? And I'm like, I can't do this. And I literally had my husband come film it. I like YouTubed how to edit shit. I'm like trying to patch it all together the best I can. I'm doing trade with photographers and trade with designers just so I can like put something together.
Yeah.
And I put together this online course and everything in me, it's so crazy. I remember the night like sitting there, I was editing my own online course. It's like midnight. My kids are in bed. And this story makes me emotional every time I share it because it was such a big pivot in my life. And I was sitting there editing this course, and everything in me is like, nobody's going to buy it. This is stupid. You're just a hairdresser, and go rely on your husband. Like, everything is telling me, like, why are you doing this? And I remember just like all of a sudden, like having this calm come over me. And I heard the voice that said, you have no idea how many people this is going to impact. And I was like, whew. And I literally like was like, it was just like hit me. And I'm like, okay, sometimes things need to be perfect and sometimes they don't. And sometimes you just have to ship it and trust that there's going to be a path.
Yeah.
So thank you. So that was kind of, that was I know things. That was like the biggest believing point in myself.
Wow.
Because so, like I said, so many people are scared to start something and fear of failure.
Yep.
And I was just like, okay. So I patchworked this online study course together. Again, nobody was selling this. Nobody was doing online courses back then. Now it's like everybody's doing it. So I'm like, okay, ship it. I priced it at $500 and I started selling probably like 10 a month. For me, 10 a month at $500, I was like, oh my God. Like out of this tiny town.
Yeah.
As a hairdresser, people are buying this product. They're flying into me. And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay. Like there's like light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of started everything. And it's been like a long journey since that, but that was the beginning of essentially the hair brand. And now, I mean, I have hairbrushes, a hairline, a salon. I have an academy with over 500 students in it. Like things are doing really well. Yeah. But it took, 13 years to get to the place where I'm at now.
Yep.
And being consistent in doing this while simultaneously still working on my marriage and trying to repair that.
Wow.
So I mean, that's just like the beginnings. My husband started his company called Wake Up Warrior around the same time.
Okay.
And
this was Wake Up Warrior. So the life coaching stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So was he still in mortgage at this point, or did he leave that completely?
I mean, I feel like that was kind of dead at that point.
Yeah.
And he's always been he would speak on mortgage stages. Like he's a really good speaker and trainer.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of going through this self-discovery process for himself. Like, what do I want to be when I grow up kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he started just creating coaching programs and then eventually launched this program called Wake Up Warrior. And essentially what it was is body, being, balance, and business. It was like, you can't just be successful, in one area. Because he was successful in one area. But then our marriage almost fell apart because we weren't staying connected. We weren't dating. He was just working, like we weren't staying connected. So he started this program almost like to help us too, like to keep every area in your life balanced because everything is essentially intertwined. If one area in your life goes south, it's going to affect the other area of your life. And so that's kind of what he started to do. And both of our brands started to pick up momentum. And that, honestly, that's probably the only reason we stayed together is I felt like we were growing at the same pace.
Oh.
So we, if I hadn't started my brand and just said, no, whatever, like, and he starts his brand, we're going to be at different vibrations, different frequencies. And we probably would have just been like, hey, or if he didn't figure out his shit, and I started making money. There were so many times where I was just like, I don't need you. When I started to make money, I was like, I don't need you. Like, I can leave you. And like, and he was making money too, but I was like, this isn't worth the fight for me.
Oh.
And so again, having 2 kids, I was like, okay, I could never get divorced or walk away if I didn't feel like I did everything in my part. So we were both, building our brands and our businesses. Things started to pick up, and then we moved to Ladera Ranch.
Okay.
And another kind of like fresh start. And things kept slowly building and building and building. And it all of a sudden went from, we were really disconnected and in a dark place to like having fun again. And like, I was like, ooh, I don't not only it's not like I have to be with you. Like I have a lot of fun with you. Like I want to be with you.
Yeah.
But it took effort. I mean, we went to, therapy every week. We went on these date nights every week. We had a lot of hard conversations. And we just kept fighting. And then I decided, I'm like, maybe I want one more baby. And I ended up having a miscarriage in between. And then I was like, let's give it some time. And then I'm like, okay, maybe let's just give it one more go. And I find out I'm pregnant at 36. And, you know, they say that's like, you're like pretty old when you're 36. You're like in maternal, whatever they call it. Like, you're like literally, like,
Dang.
you have to get like so many tests like every week. I was like,
It's after 35,
yeah,
right?
it's after 35.
Okay.
So I get pregnant, and I'm still working behind the chair because I love working behind the chair.
Okay.
And I end up developing a DVT in my leg.
What's the DVT?
So it's I don't even know the correct terminology, but it's a blood clot that it can break off and go to your heart and kill you.
Oh.
So I'm like doing hair, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like 7 months pregnant, and I find this out. So I stopped doing hair completely, and I was just like a nervous wreck. I'm like Googling, you know, DVT, like, what is this? Like, I'm just like freaking out. And I end up having my baby for about 5 weeks early, and she was fine. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
And I ended up gaining like 65 pounds with that baby.
65 pounds.
Like
You're
it was
itty-bitty?
nuts. Well,
I can't
I
imagine.
was so swollen. Like it was just nuts.
Swollen. Okay.
So this led me to, I was like, what am I going to do? Should I go back to work? What should I do? This got me into bikini competitions.
Okay.
So I went and just decided to like, I had this like limiting story that like, this is your mom body. You need to accept this. Like, just be happy you have a healthy baby. And it was, again, another moment in my life where I'm like, I'm going to shatter that story. Like, I don't accept that.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I started training for bikini competitions, lost all the weight, ended up like taking first place. And like, I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Like, I'm
That's
like, this
incredible.
is amazing. And then I'm doing a competition, and I'm like, I don't feel good. It's literally like the day of the competition. I'm like, I don't feel good. The next day I come home, I'm like, why do I feel pregnant? I'm like, no, I can't be pregnant. A week goes by. I find out I'm pregnant with my 4th daughter. It's like, hey. But the good news is, like, I was in a good space with my husband. Like, I wasn't like the end of the world. Like, even though it wasn't like planned, I was still like a little bit nervous but excited because of what had happened with my 3rd daughter. So they ended up putting me on blood thinners the whole time. I didn't develop a DVT. Everything was fine. I had her early, 5 weeks early, but she was tiny, healthy. Everything was good. So then I recovered. Everything was great. And simultaneously, we're still building our businesses and
what age were
working on our
you
marriage.
when you?
So my last one I had at 38.
38. Okay.
So yeah, four babies. But it's just been like a crazy journey. Like, there's been so many times where I could have just gave up.
Yeah.
And said, I'm going to go do this on my own. But
Yeah.
every time I see like my 4 daughters, I'm like, but then I wouldn't have this family. I wouldn't have this life. I wouldn't have, my 4 beautiful kids. I wouldn't have the business I have.
Yeah.
So even with Garrett and I, he helped me a lot along the way building my brand. Like, as it started to take off, he started helping me with like large hair events, and we started kind of working together. Now we fight. We can't work together. We found that doesn't work out really, really well.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah. Like, I try to give him business advice, and he tries to give me business advice, and it doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy journey. And we're still working on it, like, even like last year I told Garrett, I was like, I felt like we were drifting again. And I told him, I was like, hey, we have the money and the cars and all these things. I mean, we went from literally selling furniture out of our house to right now we have a $27 million home on the beach.
Yeah.
Because we stayed committed. We stayed in the fight, and we worked on ourselves individually and simultaneously.
Right.
And so as we did that, like, that's how we've created what we have today. It's what we've created, what people see like online.
Right.
But it was hard.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people aren't willing to stay in the fight.
No.
Yeah.
No. Okay. We have a lot to unpack here.
I know. I was like, sorry, I just told you my whole life story. Like,
No. I love that. I love that. So I want to go back just a little bit, because as you were talking, of course, I'm not going to interrupt you, but so a few things going back a little bit about when the moment that, and obviously it holds very dear to your heart because you start crying, that moment of like, what am I doing? Going through chronic like imposter syndrome, and just not necessarily sure of what you're doing, but you knew how to. You're kind of in this like level of desperation.
Yeah.
And I relate to that, and I know a lot of people watching this will relate to it. Um, sometimes you are put in these moments of desperation where you don't have a choice.
Right.
So going back, what would you say to the person that's kind of going through that now, going through crazy imposter syndrome, not feeling good enough, worthy enough, ready enough?
Right.
Because it's scary.
Right.
But obviously your story is, you kind of had to push that aside and be like, I don't have a choice. I have to do this.
Yeah.
And you did it, and look what happened.
Right.
Whoa. But when you're going through that, you don't think of what the best could happen. You're thinking of what the worst can happen, right? So what would you say to that person going through it right now?
I think it's like, you have this calling, right?
Yeah.
And you're not quite there yet. I think people, they have this calling and then they have this imposter syndrome because they think they see their future version of them.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's not me. And you're like, it's not you right now.
Right.
And you have to accept that.
Yeah.
You have to become this person. You have to build this person.
Yeah.
So when people say like imposter syndrome, I'm like, it's not really imposter. It's just this lack of belief in yourself for who you can become.
Yeah.
And so when you put it like that, because like, you're not going to be like right out of the gate, if you're like, Danielle, you're going to be, doing 8 figures a year and doing all, I've been like, no, I'm not. Like, that wouldn't even have been on my radar.
Yeah.
But if you start with where you're at, you never know where it's going to go. So I always tell, like, even my hairstylist, I'm like, dream big, but you have to start with where you're at.
Right.
Like, you have to look at the facts of where you're currently at and be like, what's my next milestone?
Right.
And when you build upon that, that's when it starts to get exciting, because you start to evolve. You start to become this new version of you. And then you're like, I like this version of me. And it's like this piece of you. For me, I'm like, this was who I always thought I was,
Yeah.
So you start to see success, but it's fun to watch yourself evolve. Have you ever looked back at videos of you from like, 5 years ago or even like 2 years ago? And you're like, oh my God, like what?
Cringe.
Yeah, right? So I think the biggest thing is just starting.
Yeah.
And start with where you're at.
Yep.
And dream big, but again, you're not there yet.
Yep.
Like, and I know sometimes I feel like that sounds kind of cold. And I'm like, you're not there yet. And don't compare yourself to people in the game that have more reps than you.
Right.
You have the potential to be there, but you're going to have to put in the reps to get there. And that's still, to me, what I do today. Like, I naturally, like, I am definitely introverted, but like I said, I'm pretty comfortable now. But even now, I have to make myself like do stuff that I'm uncomfortable with, because I'll be like, I could do that. And I'm like, well, I'm not. So I need to have this like humbling experience where I'm not where she is or he is, because I'm unwilling to do the work. So as good as I think I am with my ego and my hair brands and all this, they're doing something that I'm not doing. So that's kind of what humbles me in a way, and like makes me like get uncomfortable time and time again.
Yeah.
Is just realizing that you have to put the work in and you have to get the reps in to become that person.
Oof. That's a mic drop right there. That's good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh man. The news with your husband having that affair. First of all, that was a curveball I didn't see coming.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I told you that before. Yeah.
Nope, you didn't tell me that before. And so obviously you didn't give up. You both didn't give up. Obviously, you guys are doing so well now, but you had to gain that trust again, because to anyone, especially the way that you grew up in the religion, that is so shattering. And first of all, how were you able to get through that, build that trust again? Obviously, it took time, but making that decision to keep going, because most people in this society today would just be like, that's it. We're done.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Divorce.
Yeah.
And now people today are married, twice now, 3 times now, 3 times divorce. And you're just like, whoa, that's just society we live in. But that wasn't the case for you guys. And that is so admirable.
Yeah.
People, when things aren't working in relationships, and I've never been married, but, I've seen my parents and, twice divorced. And it's living through that too, and seeing it as a child is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think back and you look back and you're just like, why don't you guys just figure it out, And And people just give up nowadays. And older
Yeah.
couples today, sometimes I'll just have conversations with older couples, and because I'm so curious, I'm like,
How'd you
dang,
do
you
it?
guys been together for like 60 years.
Yeah.
You don't see that. Like, people are just giving up left and right.
Yeah.
Please speak on that, because I think a lot of people need to hear this.
Yeah. It's crazy too because I I feel like in the beginning, I was in a vulnerable space, right? Like when
Yeah.
he shared this news, I'm thinking like, okay, I have no skills. I'm a mom. I'm literally pregnant with my second child. Like, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I feel like a lot of women stay in relationships that they don't want to be in because they lack a belief in themselves. And it's like, because there's something like I love that my man can provide safety and security. And I think that's a natural thing that women look for.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I don't ever want to feel like I'm in a relationship because I have to be in that relationship. So for me, it was very important to find, I always say I was like finding my way out. I was like, literally like I created another bank account and was like putting money in like another bank account just as like an
Oh,
escape.
so you were plotting.
Oh, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I was just scared, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was rebuilding that trust. Like he
Yeah.
took away everything financially when he was supposed to be the provider and then
Yeah.
had this emotional affair.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to start working on me, but I'm not going to just give him the money that I'm making. So I started literally like hiding money away. And I mean, it was dark for probably like 5-7 years where it was touch and go. We were like, we're getting divorced. No, we're not. We're getting divorced. No, we're not. We're getting divorced.
Dang.
And it was where there was enough of us kind of like growing together that kept us together because
Wow.
I believe that we were both like individually working on ourselves. So if you're in a relationship and one person's working on themselves and the other one is not, eventually they'll drift apart and that's what causes divorce. And so for me, it was just, I think we stayed enough connected because I was working on myself. And I think a lot of times I wanted to call it quits. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And he was rebuilding, trust with me. And he started producing and making money. And I remember we were renting. We'd finally gotten out of the hole from all of our debt. We like paid that off. We were making money and we were still renting a home. This was when we were in California. And I remember one day I looked at him and I was like, hey, like, we don't need to rent anymore. For me, I was like, I'm trying to build this like trust back with you. Why are we renting? Like, why don't we go buy a home? And he was like, you're just a gold digger. And like, I can't believe you want. And I was like, yeah, like it was one of those moments I was like, because I literally was like, if you don't buy me a home, I'm out.
Yeah.
But for me, it signified.
But again, it's that security.
Yes.
You're already like hurt from the
Yeah.
past and the experience. Like you need that security. And
Yeah.
so having a home over renting, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
I
to
think
me, it was like it showed that he's all in.
right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you need to get over this story that we can't buy anymore. And he still was like, no, we can't buy anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't believe that story. So I go online, I find some realtors. I'm like, can you show me around? I start talking to banks. I start entertaining possibilities.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people don't entertain all possibilities and they think it's too far out of reach. So that's really when I would say our marriage started to take a turn. It wasn't so touch and go. Is literally I ended up finding a home in the Strand where we live now.
Okay.
And it was actually 2 houses down from the one we live in now. And he was like, no, we can't afford this and that. And I ended up finding a realtor that helped us sell our finance. And it was like, he was like, we can't, it was because at that time it was like an $8 million home. So to go from renting to an $8 million home, he's like, no, we can't do that. And it all worked out. And we ended up getting a loan and we got the house. And I was like, oh, I got my safety and security back, And so then like, that's when things started to get a little bit better because I felt like he was finally like, okay, I'm all in. Like he invested cash. I actually, when we bought that house, I closed my secret account.
Oh,
that's when I closed. I was like, I'll keep you.
Oh my gosh.
So I closed my secret account and he was like, I think there was like $300,000 in it. And he was like, you had $300,000? I was like, yeah, I was just tucking away for a rainy day,
For a rainy day.
I was like, I didn't know, but
That's a nice
I ended up,
rainy day.
well, I shouldn't have told him that because then he made me furnish the whole house. He's like, cool, you're on furniture.
Oh.
And I was like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But so that's when things kind of took a turn and it was like, I felt safe and I started to actually be more in my feminine at that point. Because up until then, as a producer, like, you know how it goes. Like, you can go back and forth into your masculine and feminine quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think I'm naturally feminine, but when I was building my businesses, you have to be a little bit more masculine.
Right.
And so during that time too, I felt like we were working on our marriage, but we were kind of in this like competing mode, you know, like I was like, well, like just with finances and everything. It was just like there was a lot of competing. And I finally felt like when we got that house, I kind of just like mellowed out a little bit. And that's when I got pregnant with my third daughter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, whoops.
A little too mellowed.
Yeah, I was like, I got a house and a baby. So,
Yep.
so
there you go.
It's just crazy. Like I think that for me, when people are like, how have you guys done this? I'm like, we worked on it. Like even when we were in dark times, we were, like I said, we were doing therapy. We've been doing these date nights every single week for, 13 years since we almost like when we lost everything. That's when we committed to doing date nights every single week. And some nights we'd go on date nights and we'd fight the whole time.
Oh.
But I was like, well, we got a babysitter, so whatever. Like, I'm going to eat my dinner and fight with you. Like, I don't care. And so that was one of the things that like kept us together, because it was, even if we were fighting, we were communicating. So when you stop communicating, it's almost like you get to this place where you don't even care anymore. And that's when you get to kind of a scary space. You're out of the fight.
Yeah.
That's why I always say, like, stay in the fights, keep your communication going, and then for us, the other thing that's been really helpful is having therapy. And I was very resistant to that.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not broken. I don't need therapy. You're the crazy one. Like, my husband's very like, he's very like high-low energy.
Yeah.
So I was like, you're broken. You go ahead and do therapy. And then I got to this place where I was like, Danielle, have you done everything inside of your marriage? Are you ready to actually like call it quits for the 19th time? And I was like, well, I've never done therapy. I've always been very resistant to it. So I was like, sure, let's do therapy. And it was so interesting when we started to do therapy. The therapists were always on my side. I was like, oh, I like this.
So it's easier.
Because it was like, we'd say one thing that would trigger him. He's very reactive and he'd be like, ah, and they'd be like, Garrett, like, calm it down, And it would flip it where I felt like the therapist was a sounding board.
Okay.
Because it was almost like he couldn't hear it through me. But if she took something I said and repeated it back to Garrett, he's like, oh, I can see. And vice versa. He would say something that I would be so triggered and emotionally shut down.
Yeah.
That's literally what I would do. He would be very like, his personality was like very, just very over the top. And I would just literally like shut down. And so it made it hard for us to communicate when I would just shut down. And so many women do that. They're like, I don't want to fight. But you have to be able to get through these issues or you won't be able to repair your marriage. Yeah. So this is when, again, we started doing therapy and it worked as like a sounding board. And we still to this day, like if we're in a rough spot or there's conversations that we can't get through, I'm like, hey, can you schedule a session? I'm like, because we keep arguing over this same thing and it's stupid. But we got to this place too in our marriage. And I think it's so important that you have to do something for the other person to get what you want. And I always tell people, I'm like, how do you get what you want? It's like, there's some things in marriage where you want to like take a stand on. You're like, but I didn't win. So why am I taking a stand on this argument or whatever it is? Like, ultimately, like I need his needs to be met and he needs my needs to be met. So we've worked a ton on our marriage. Like I always tell people, I'm like, you put work into your business, you put work into your kids, you put work into your body. And then your marriage is like last on the list. Like very few couples will date every single week. Very few couples will take the time to take a vacation together. And then they wonder when they're disconnected and it's not working out. And it's like, you didn't work on your marriage. If you didn't work on your business, it wouldn't be successful. So we started to treat almost our marriage as essentially a business.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, and it didn't take, it's not like a full-time, like 40-hour a week thing. It was like the weekly date nights, the therapy calls, the trips, every once in a while and things like that, that really to this day keep us connected.
Wow.
But yeah, I think that if you don't let yourself drift too far, because then it's harder to bring it back in, and do things that will help maintain a healthy marriage, like date nights, like therapy if you need it, like time where you're just even tucking the kids to bed and having like a 15-minute window where you're not on your cell phones and you're just talking and connecting. How was your day?
That's good. What about how your kids went through all of this?
Yeah, my oldest daughter, I feel like she saw so much. You know what I mean?
I'm sure, yeah.
She's almost 18 and she remembers us fighting a lot. She would say that. She'd be like, it was hard. Like, I literally would shut my door and like I could hear you and dad, yelling.
Mm.
And so in a way, I have this mom guilt where I'm like, she saw all these things, but there wasn't anything I didn't want to sit in a space where I feel so guilty. It was just who I was then,
Right, yeah.
And I think she's actually so strong now. She's like such a strong, beautiful, independent woman. I mean, she's 17 going on 18, and she's very passionate about music and all these things. And so a lot of times women sit in kind of this mom guilt of like, I did it wrong, but consider like, you didn't do it wrong. You did the best you could at the time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And kids will see that. Like, even though I felt like she saw a lot and went through a lot, she's like my most lovey kid. She's like, I love you, mom. Like, thank you for what you do. Like, so I have to give myself some points there. I'm like, you kind of had like a rough, like upbringing. In fact, she, when she was, she was 13, she started to get into drugs and hang out with the wrong crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up sending her away to like a wilderness camp in Utah. And that was so hard for me as a mom, but I was pregnant with my 4th daughter at that time. And I just remember that was like a really rough pregnancy anyways. And then my daughter, I find out she's hanging out with the wrong people and like all this stuff. And I ended up sending her to this wilderness camp for 6 months. She did 3 months in wilderness, and then they do like a 3-month boarding school. So she didn't see me the whole time I was pretty much pregnant with my 4th daughter.
Wow.
But I mean, so it's hard. I mean, it's hard. Like, it's to say it doesn't impact kids, but everybody has their individual path and design.
Yeah.
Like the things that you went through made you the woman you are today, So I have no doubt that my kids will see the example of both me and Garrett, but also not to feel in that mom guilt space, not to feel too bad about, I didn't show up a certain way.
Right.
Because there was times where even when I was building my brand with my first 2 daughters, I remember I would wake up, pack them lunches, take them to school, drive to Laguna Beach to my salon at the time, had the nanny pick them up, drive home. They were already in bed because I was working the 12-hour days, as a hairstylist.
Yeah.
And I remember even thinking one night it was before I had my last 2. So backing up, I only had the 2 kids at the time, and I'm in the thick of building my brand. And I remember dropping my kids off, right, like I said, at school, and then going to work all day and coming home, they're already tucked in bed. And this was like a regular occurrence for me. And that was another pivot in my life where I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I building this brand? Like, my husband's business was making some money at that point. I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't need to be doing this. And I had all this, mom guilt kind of creep back in. And there was one day I was driving home from the salon, and I literally just like sat in my car and just like cried. I'm just like, I don't want my kids to see me this way. And I'm just like, I just wipe the tears, come in, hi, happy face.
Yeah.
And there was one particular night it's always midnight, and I'm like working on my blog for some reason. I think I'm like having a glass of wine, like working on emails and stuff. And again, that thought comes up. It's like, why are you doing this? And I just, again, start crying. I'm sitting at my computer. I'm like, why am I doing this? And it's one of those moments, again, that calm voice comes over. And it's like, you'd be selfish to quit. Because I have all this mom guilt telling me I'm being selfish.
Yep.
And then this voice says, you'd be selfish to quit.
Yeah.
So I always look at that. If you're a mother entrepreneur, it's like, who are you not impacting by telling yourself these stories of, my kids are my only purpose? Now, I love my kids. I love my kids. But my kids are not my only purpose. They're a purpose in my life. They are a gift and a blessing in my life. And what I realized in that moment of, having these crazy 12-hour days, I literally woke up the next day and I was like, I'm going to fire half my clientele. Because I was doing both hair extensions and hair color. And I was like, I need to do the numbers. This is stupid that I'm living in this space of mom guilt. And I just need better boundaries. And so even when hairstylists, you were telling me on my podcast, you're like, I was tired, like my body hurt. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, well, I don't want to just quit. Like, I feel a bigger calling in this. I'm like, I can't just quit, but I'm like, but I can't keep working these 12-hour days. This is hard on my body. It's hard on my kids. And so I literally fired half my clients. I doubled my prices overnight. At this point in my career, I had tons of people flying into me on Saturdays. And I was like, I'm not working Saturdays anymore. I called all of them that were coming in on Saturdays. I'm like, you need to reschedule your flight. So sorry. And I was like, I'll pay for the flight change or whatever it is. I'm no longer working Saturdays. And so many people think that like this switch has to take like a long period of time. For me, it was overnight.
Wow.
And
literally.
when I did that, I doubled my revenue in I
Wow.
think 6 weeks. And I went from working like 5 days a week to 3 days a week and only doing hair extensions.
Wow.
So it's crazy. Like the mom guilt is real.
Right.
But
Yep.
also it all comes down to creating whatever you want and setting specific boundaries for yourself. And I always say, if you can look at the facts of where you're at, you can create a plan and stop living in these stories.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I did. That's one of the things I teach hairstylists nowadays. I'm like, it's like I'm like, you're creating these limiting beliefs. I'm like, what's the number you want to make? What do you want to make this month?
Mhm.
And oftentimes they will set a target that's too low or too little because of lack of belief in themselves and the title of just being a hairstylist. So
Yeah.
then, you know, you kind of unfold or bend their reality a little bit. And a lot of the hairstylists that I train to this day, they're like, wow, I didn't dream big enough. I'm like, I know.
Wow.
So it's crazy. Now it's fun because I'm in a space with my second two kids where I can work 10 hours a week if I want, but my companies are kind of running themselves. And I love it. I still have a full-time nanny, but I like get to see my kids whenever I want, kiss them and hug them. I'm working in my office downstairs. And I told Garrett all the time, I'm like, we had two kids and we were in a dark space. Then we were building our businesses and working our asses off. I'm like, we got blessed with two more kids. I go, I'm not doing it like that. So for me, I've been way more in my feminine and doing like the mom thing lately, which I love. But I also, again, I love doing things for me. I love taking care of me. I love working out. So I still have a full-time nanny that helps me out, packs lunches, runs the kids around if I need them. So I just feel like I'm in this space where I'm just really enjoying being with my kids. Like I got a redo basically.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah.
Absolutely amazing. What's next for you?
Oh, I was like, oh, I've done it. Like I had all my kids, check that off the list. I've got my hairline that's doing great. Everything, business is going great. I can go to work, but I don't have to if I don't want to. I was like, everything's great. And then, you know, you get this calling that comes to you again and these little nudges. And I was like, okay. Like right now, I feel like I'm called to expand more than just the hair industry.
Okay.
So a lot of people in the hair industry, they know of Natural Vita Rose, they know of like Isla Hair, they know of me, you know, at some level. Maybe some don't, but I always tell them, I'm like, I'm the original person who started hand-tied hair extensions. Like at the time when I started my brand, nobody was using hand-tied hair. It was literally the lowest selling hair in the marketplace. And it's funny, I loved it. I'd been using it for years. I was like, lays really flat. It's like easy to sew in. And but again, I didn't like realize I'd created something that was kind of unique. So I didn't charge because nobody was doing it. It wasn't the trendy thing. And this is kind of a backstory, but I realized I'm like, hey, all these bloggers that I was following, they'd pair like Zara with like Chanel glasses and Chanel. And I was like, oh, we need to just package this hand-tied hair as looking like a little more elite. And so when I started blogging, I bought like my first designer bag and I thought I was going to like throw up because it was like $2,000 and I'd never spent that on a bag. And now if you know me, I'm like, I love bags and shoes. That's like my thing. But at the time I was like, I need to position this hand-tied hair as more of like a luxury item. So I started talking about hair while wearing like designer pieces, the ones that I could afford and put together. And that's really what elevated the brand of hand-tied hair and what really started to get it going. So anyways, now, like I said, now I feel like I'm called to do something bigger, but it's like one of those things you don't really know where it's going to go, but you know, you just need to go. Yeah. And so I recently kind of revamped my podcast. I was only having like hairstylists and I would treat it more like a training. And I was like, I need to start similar to like your podcast. Where I'm like, I need to start inviting people on and kind of hear their stories. So that's kind of where I'm at right now is I'm looking to just expand my personal brand. I just started my first book and I'm really excited about that. I'm really stressed about it, but I'm excited about that. So I don't necessarily know where things are going to go other than I just feel called to do more at this point and share my story to help inspire or empower other women, you know, whether they're in the hair industry or they're a mom or they're an entrepreneur or they have all these limiting beliefs. I'm like, you guys, I was a girl from Utah that left my religion, that left my culture, that lost everything, that rebuilt it, you know, in 10 years to an 8-figure business and had 4 kids. And I was like, so many turning points in my life I had to go through.
Yeah.
So now I'm just at this place where I'm like, okay, this isn't the end. This is a new beginning. So for me, I'm like scared shitless. I'm like, oh my God, okay, I thought I made it, you know, doing all the things, houses, cars, winning bikini competitions, 4 kids. And I was like, what is missing? It's like, it feels like there's like a hole missing still. So I'm in a new chapter right now. You're seeing me at a new, I feel like a new chapter.
I want to say it's a whole, I think you just peeled off a new layer of like, you're elevating to a new level.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening. And your calling is bigger than what you're doing now.
Right.
So, and again, you just said that you're expanding, you're kind of revamping your podcast, going from, because I scrolled through it, a lot of it at the beginning was about hair.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about people's stories. So
Yeah.
that's number one. Number two, you bringing the new type of people on your podcast is going to open up new conversations, new opportunities, new doors. And it's going to expand your the sphere of influence, right? So you're gonna create new relationships, and it's gonna expand your mind. Now with this book, yeah, you're scared, but as you know, you grow most when you're uncomfortable, and it's scary, but look what you've been through already.
Right.
So technically this is nothing,
right?
But also it's a new kind of scary that you have never dealt with before.
Right.
But after you finish it and after you release it, which I'm sure is going to be phenomenal, and once you release it, you definitely have to come back,
right?
And we'll talk about it. Can you share a little bit about like what that book is going to be about?
So it's kind of like my story.
Okay.
And I want it to be, my goal is to give people permission. Like that's my big thing. I'm like, hey, you guys, it doesn't matter what town you live in. It doesn't matter what culture, community you live in. Like you can create whatever you want.
Yeah.
You just have to stay consistent and committed. And honestly, like you said, like feeling uncomfortable. I know you just started your coaching program too.
Oh, and I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not
ready.
You're
never ready though.
Yes, you're never ready. But it came with having the people surrounding you to tell you, yes, you are. Jump off. Just jump off. Just jump off. Right? Yeah. Thank goodness for your husband too, because even when the darkest times, he still was like, well, he helped expand your mindset.
Pushes me.
Yes. So that's great. So regardless of what you end up deciding to do anyways, just saying yes
is the start.
Is the start.
Yeah.
Right. And you just said all you have to do is start.
Well, and I always say too, like you might feel unqualified, but that doesn't mean you're not called.
Yeah.
So it's like when you can't ignore that calling in that sense, you're like, all right, God, let's go.
Yep.
Where are we going? I'm here to listen.
Oh, that's so excited.
I'm at a new chapter and I'm excited.
So beautiful. I'm so excited. And I have no doubts that you're just going to get there like that. Yeah. I mean, I'm just so excited.
Thank you.
So one last question. In your definition, what does pain to power mean to you?
I feel like everybody, to get to a powerful place, they have to be in the pit. They have to be in that painful space. You have to choose yes. And that's really what transforms your life. So immediately when I heard the title of your podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I want to be on that. Because my husband and I, we teach something similar, but we call it pit to peak.
Okay.
And so, he's like, same thing. He's like, and you're always going to have a new pit. But the crazy thing is as your capacity expands, you know that you're going to get through it. Just like you said, you're like, I'm in a pit right now, but I know I'm going to get through it.
Yeah.
So I would just say, like, for anybody listening to this who is struggling, who is in that pit, the more you get out of that pit, it doesn't get easier, but you just know what you've gone through and you know who you are and you know where you're going.
So good. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That was so much fun.
Yeah.
You guys, if you loved it just as much as I did, and you know it's going to help somebody else, please share, like, subscribe, all the things, and I will see you at the next one.